Good morning. I'm a little early today because of the snow. I just got back from Mexico. We were supposed to actually come back Monday, but the weather got us too, and we ended up staying an extra day in paradise. So that was great. So today, I want to get back on track and talk about my three segments. If I were running for Illinois governor, and of course, the local politics going on in the legislature, and then in with what I did my podcast about. Okay, so let's start with what's happening in the race for governor of Illinois. So today is January 28th. So the primary is actually March 17th. And wow, that's not a lot of time to get your message out. Then I remembered something. I remembered that when Pritzker, who became Governor Pritzker, the first time that he ran, he was putting out ads very early. And that strategy apparently worked for him. I think that the Republicans running for governor, if I were running for governor, I probably would have started a year prior trying to raise money so that I could do ads and things like that. The Republican Party here, maybe they should look at that because you need visibility early on if you want people to look at your ideas, because in the modern age, that's what matters. Introduce yourself, and with social media pretty should be a little bit easier. I do this segment just to get some attention on the fact that in Southern Illinois or the Metro East, we don't get a lot of visibility, and we've got the numbers if we would vote to change the outcome of an election statewide. Okay, so what do the Republicans focus on? Well, they're focused on affordability, physical accountability, and public safety. All right. And the state party is positioning itself as a check on the Democratic supermajority spending and tax policies. Okay. Yes, those are all good, lofty, big ideas. Um, However, there's no real focus on what I've been talking about. There's been a little bit. So today, if I were running for governor, whoever's running, I think that you should have a little bit of a different strategy. First of all, you got to know what you're working against. There is a super majority in the House of Representatives in Illinois. What does that mean? Well, it means to me that most people in the state, in these local areas, are aligning with what the Democratic platform is. So, in order to break that up a little bit, you have to really look at who's getting elected in these positions. And as governor, as we're going to find out here in a little bit, running for governor by itself, you can't change the whole state immediately. Now, you can do some things, but their lofty idea sounds great, but these are the same as the national goals, really, especially the public safety. And that hasn't seemed to be really resonating with voters because they don't understand what you mean by it. Okay, so let's look at their key policy positions. Now, I'm not going to name the people who are running for governor because I have no platform to interview them, get their ideas. So I'm looking at generalizations of what the Republican Party is doing in the state. And I think that that's fair. Okay. So the first one is affordability and taxations. So prioritizing property tax release and oppose any shift toward a progressive or graduated income tax. So specific proposals include eliminating taxes on tips and overtime and providing relief for car loan interest. Okay, well, that sounds good. I talked about the taxes, and honestly, this is their strongest point to change who the governor is in the state. And I'll tell you why it's important when I get to some other facts and details. Now, if I were running for governor, I would, no kidding, only be talking about taxes in this state. And over the last couple of weeks, I've told you why. I think that community taxing should be the way that we go. Now, I don't know if I've made up a new term or not, but that's what makes sense to me. The more people you have paying into the system, the more money that you're going to have, and then it's going to be fair. And so that's why it has to be set up like this. And also, you have to get people's buy in for big changes that you want to do. And you can't do that in roughly 12 weeks for the primary. Okay, so fiscal management. So they're calling for stricter control over state spending to address the 2.2 billion deficit. Okay, now that is one thing that the governor can affect in Illinois, even if the Democrats have a supermajority. And the governor's veto, as it sits right now, is one of the most powerful uh, legislative tools that a governor can use of any state in the country. Probably most of us didn't know that. I didn't know that until I did the research, and I'll tell you why in a second. So, fiscal management is something that the governor of Illinois can affect. Public safety. Okay, advocating for the Repeal of Safety Act. I talked about that. And strengthen law enforcement and address crime. Okay, so they need to get specific on that because a lot of the acts being passed now are protecting people who just got into the country, whether they are here legally or not. That's been the focus of the legislature the last 2 or 3 years. All right. Here's one that they can actually get some traction on. Focus is on restoring parental rights in education and establish merit based academic standards. They could get some traction, especially in the suburbs, with this one. So, more talk about that. Everybody wants to be treated fairly. So, if I'm running for governor, you have to talk to people and say, hey, look, here's what you're going to get out of this if we change these rules on parental rights, etc. Because again, education and definitely taxing are the two most important things for people who are going to the ballot box. All right. So now, there's also some other things going on. So, there is an attempt to appeal to Collier County voters by highlighting federal SALT deduction cap relief and criticizing the current administration for uh, uh, doing things that are distractions from helping us in the state. And I think that it would be fair game if you're running for governor, if I were, to talk about some of these policies of immigration that are causing taxes to go up and this fairness thing. So, for taxation, just as a side note here, um, in Missouri right now, they're trying to get rid of that income tax. And the reason that that's interesting is the first thing that happened is that we have people saying they get out there on the radios and on TV saying why they can't afford it and that it would affect working class people when actually it wouldn't. And so the narrative from the beginning is you don't want to try anything new, you want status quo. Now, in Illinois, the reason that we would want to get rid of the income tax is, as I stated prior, we're not taxing everybody. And it's not fair to the people currently paying taxes. It is unfair. And there's 3 or 4 sources of revenue that we need to get down. One of them is the property taxes. And if I were running for governor, that would be all that I would be talking about is we've got the second highest property taxes or third in the country, in the United States of America, and that should not be. And remember something now that the federal funds for the next 3 or 4 years or less, how are they going to get the money? Well, they're going to come after you with income taxes. And whoever's running for governor on the Republican side, they need to lead with that. That is an outcome that's going to be coming from people paying taxes in this state. Now, I don't think that you should get rid of the pensions and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, a lot of the money coming in under like a new taxation system should shore it up. Okay, so let's go on down some here. Now, I highlighted executive orders. So a governor can affect the state with a couple of these executive orders. And the reason that I picked that is that's how it translates into power to overcome what the legislature is actually doing. So, for example, Governor Pritzker did asylum seekers executive order. In response to buses of asylum seekers sent from other states, Governor Pritzker declared a disaster area which enabled the state to coordinate resources. Resources means that we're talking about temporary housing, aid to local governments with emergency purchases. That translates, and if you will remember, that's exactly what happened. And then we started spending a whole lot of money in this state. Now, with a Republican governor, that would never have happened. Now, you want to help folks, and the narrative needs to change. People who are here legally, yes, the federal law supports that. That's why they were getting funding. But the issue is not that. The issue is people who are here illegally, and the state of Illinois won't even address if they're here legally or not. So I've talked about that in the past. All of that is related to funding and taxes. The governor also did something called food assistance. Executive order directed state agencies to mitigate the impact of federal cuts to the SNAP program and coordinate efforts to support food banks, local grocers, and reduce administrative barriers for recipients. Reduce administrative barriers. So that means less checking and you just give folks the money. The governor can affect that. And the governor of Illinois is doing that. And that translates into more money coming out of the hands of taxpayers. All right. So I'm going to get to the most important one. Okay. Legislative changes through veto. Like I told you earlier, the governor of Illinois has some pretty broad veto powers when the legislature is passing these laws. And if I were running for governor, I would highlight that because that translates into why you would want a check on the legislature if you have the supermajority Democrats in the legislature. All right, so here's what it is. So the governor can directly alter or block legislation passed by the General Assembly using four distinct powers. First one, a mandatory veto. So the governor of Illinois can return a bill with specific suggestions for changes. If the legislature accepts these changes by a simple majority, the bill becomes law as amended. That's the first one. Second one is the line item veto. If you remember from the 90s, the federal government tried that, and then the Supreme Court said that that wasn't constitutional. So, for appropriations spending bills, the governor can strip specific items or projects while signing the rest of the bill into law. That's a cost savings for the taxpayers in Illinois. And if you're running for governor, if I were, I would be talking about this nonstop. Reduction veto. The governor can reduce the dollar amount of a specific item in an appropriations bill without eliminating it entirely. Okay, there you go. So these two are very, very important because it's about money, it's about taxation, and it's about who gets it. The governor of Illinois can do that. And that's when taxpayers can finally get a break. That is your tie in to why you'd rather have a Republican governor versus a Democrat, just for that reason. And again, to not to belabor the point of the legislature is a supermajority of Democrats, and the governor currently will sign anything that they want, pretty much. So, the other big issue, if I were running for governor of Illinois, is I would really define for folks what the sanctuary city law areas is about. So if you do a little simple research, it started in the 80s, and at the time it seemed like a good idea. It was more about, well, I'll get to that in a second. So the current things that are pending legislation, one of them is no bailout for sanctuary cities. As you know or may not know, the House passed it both in 2024 and 2025. So what it does is it defines sanctuary jurisdictions and make them ineligible for federal funds intended to benefit undocumented immigrants. Okay, because that is really what this is about. This is about undocumented immigrants and the services that taxpayers are paying for. And the other one is what kind of put everything in place was so that in 1996 there was a law that says laws remain the primary federal statutes that they prohibit state and local governments from restricting the exchange of information with federal authorities regarding an individual's citizenship or immigration status. That's what actually created the sanctuary cities based on what I just said below. Now, running for governor, you need to define these things to your constituents so that they can make an informed decision about why they should vote for you and why the state is better. It's in better interest of the state for uh, us to have everybody paying the taxes so that they're lower for everyone. And some of these other issues would probably be less important. And what I really mean by that, so if, let's say, undocumented people were actually working, paying taxes, and helping to pay for some of the services, maybe the other side wouldn't be so firm about not wanting to pay for it. And so that's what a candidate needs to translate out to people so that they don't think that they just don't want to take care of anybody and they want everybody out. They want people out who are undocumented. We don't know their status. Okay, so more on that next time that we come together. Now, since we're talking about it, the legislature is in session and it takes them, it looks like a couple of weeks to get anything going, but they can't get any major legislation pushed through yet anyway because the Senate is not back yet. So I will keep you in the loop when that stuff, when stuff starts coming through for bills that are being put up for the whole legislature. I told you that they were focused on immigration, and I think this year they're going to have to do a tax increase on someone. So for Illinoisans, that means that things are going to get a little bit more expensive. It doesn't look like that they're going to give anybody breaks. I predicted, and you heard it here first, I think property taxes are going to go up in even more. We get our tax bill here in April, May, something like that. So I can tell you, if they increase them in Cook County, then it stands to they actually double them, like I keep telling you, that they're going to continue with that. I also did a podcast this morning, and what I was talking about was foreign aid. I was interested. I did it for 2026. I can't really take credit for alerting the federal government about the waste since I didn't know the president, I didn't know Elon Musk or anybody like that. But if you go back and you look at my podcast from 2 years ago, you can see that I knew about it. So for whatever that's worth, that's important. I did look at the numbers, and we went from 2024 of paying 66 billion, probably even more than that because of the war, to dropping the levels in half and then under half. They have officially closed U.S. aid, which means that they downsized it to just a little bit of staff. Now, what do I mean by that? This is a great example. So when we get a new president, especially if it's a Democrat, they could reopen it, rehire those people. They could also retroactively pay those people because they could say that they were terminated illegally. See, that'd be up to whoever the president is at that time, because a lot of these types of things with foreign aid are tied to executive orders that President Trump has done. So that's why my plug for voting again is to stay informed and vote your interest. But the podcast focuses on that and also looks at the numbers that we were spending. The US doubled it or tripled it. The next highest one was Germany, which was spending half of what we were. And interestingly enough, the Arabians and the Middle East countries were spending 4 or 5, 6 billion when we were spending 60. Now, looking at just the facts and data, we need to understand that. We also, meaning the US, put some new policies in that says, hey, we're looking at assisting economically to get you on your feet. You're not supposed to be dependent on us paying it every every year. So I'll talk more about that on Friday when I recap it again and then give you some new information. All right. Well, this was a great program. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And I will be back again on Friday. And let's get out there and get along. And also listen to what the other side is saying. And my opinion is, if you're looking at Minnesota, some bad things have happened, but it's on a incident by incident look at it. Let's not try and group everyone into one category and call them all bad. People make mistakes, and when they make mistakes, they should pay for it. But we have to have the facts and data first. And that's how we should start. And sometimes you can look at something on a video and you're not even sure if you got when it started or when they start, the one who's making the video, with what they saw. So we really need to have a little bit of patience and remember something too. I talked about the monks who came from Texas that were marching to Washington, D.C., and we've heard nothing about them whatsoever. And also, we've got nurses on strike in New York City doing demonstrations. Like I say, I don't like the word protesters because that seems to mean that people could or could not be violent. But demonstrations, and yet the mainstream media, they haven't showed them. Because why? There's no action, there's no friction. That is not a way, in my opinion, to cover news in the United States. You had to cover them all fairly and get out of the habit of just, if something bad happens, keep showing it. Okay. This is Just Listen, hosted by George, live podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day, and we will see you on Friday.